or you probably will hear the beep. There it goes.
There it is. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us this morning. Our presentation is entitled, Oh, the Places You'll Go, and we built this out of requests from people to learn about virtual field trips and things that you can do online. And so it's grown out of that request. So in case you don't know us, I'm Gladys, and that's Alicia, and we're going to present together. Okay. So our objective today is that you'll plan for digital learning experiences by reviewing the best practices for instructions and reevaluating your current practices to increase the engagement and to provide those authentic.
Gladys, can you hear me? I think unmute yourself. You're muted.
Well, I have no idea what happened there.
That was my fault.
Okay, then. Alicia muted me. All right. All right, so before we begin, let's start with the question. If you could take your kids anywhere to experience one thing that's outside of the classroom, what would you do? What would it be? Where would you go? You can put it in the chat. You can unmute and talk. Guatemala to the Galapagos Islands. Take a hike. I'm going to be in your class, Catherine.
Chicago Bulls game. Whoop, whoop. Oh, Mexican Fine Arts Museum. I love that idea.
Camp Snoopy. I want to know what that is. I have to write it down. I once went to a teacher conference in San Francisco, and I thought it was the most unbelievable city, and I've always thought this would be a great field trip. So if I had to, my brain would be like, we're going to San Francisco.
I don't know. There's so many places that I want to go that like I can't even pinpoint like one, but I know that Nathan's been to California and he says how beautiful San Francisco and San Diego are, and like the weather's always perfect and beautiful, and yeah, so I guess I would like to experience that once in my lifetime.
I went to a wedding in a park in Hawaii that was on top of the volcano, and it was just so beautiful that if virtual field trip or real field trip, or I could go, I would want to go back, because I went as a teenager and I thought it was lovely, but as a teenager you don't appreciate everything you're supposed to appreciate.
True.
Okay, so we're starting to think about things that excite us, things that could motivate us, and that we would all enjoy and our students would enjoy. So here is our working definition of digital learning experiences. When we first started, we thought it was going to mostly be about virtual field trips, but there's a lot of things that are within this realm of digital learning experiences that we kind of broadened it. So it's those experiences that are outside the classroom environment, that bring the textbook, life outside of the textbook into the learning process. And it could include field trips, and it could include, Skype type interviews, but it can include a lot more. So what digital learning experiences have you tried with your students, and what has worked and what hasn't worked? Have you tried virtual field trips? Have you tried interviewing?
I guess we're all new to this, huh?
Okay. So I get to talk about the thought process of, as you're thinking about this instructional experience, this learning experience for your students, what you should be thinking of. Okay, so I have somebody said Nearpods VR.
Glacier National Park, while talking about water cycle, is another one I see in there, Gladys.
Okay.
Art Institute of Chicago as well, which is a great one.
So there's really two reasons that I have seen teachers using these digital learning experiences. And one is as a reward or a bonus activity, like, okay, so today we're not doing our typical learning, we're going to go have this fun, and we're going to go do something exciting. And it's not always connected to your current unit. And then I've seen teachers use digital learning experiences to deepen the understanding or to extend the learning that's happening in the current unit. And that's really kind of what I personally want to focus on during this time, is taking what we have going on in the classroom, this instruction, whether the classroom is in person or virtual, and extending it more so that it can help to deepen understanding for students. So for my section, we're going to be looking at steps to take when you're planning digital learning experiences. I'm going to share a planning template, and I'm going to share an example. So as I thought about how you should plan, you know, plans could go bigger and bigger and bigger, but it's silly to overwhelm yourself, because you guys are all expert teachers who know how to plan. But when we're thinking about digital learning experiences, I focused on 4 areas. So the content. So does it fit in with what the students are learning, and what standards does it address? What student work or what assessment are you what product are you going to get at the end? And how will that show you what they've learned? And then what activities, like what steps you want the students to take, and any resources, like the things that they're going to need for supports. So I came up with a planning template, and I'll show you that. And so it is very basic, because it just has those 4 sections. So what is the content that you want to focus on? What is the student work or assessment that you want to, if my Chromebook could catch up with itself there. There it is. What assessment, how will you know the students learned what you wanted them to, and how you will assess that? What are the steps the students want to take, and what materials will they need? And then what resources or graphic organizers do they need? So this was my thought process when I was coming up with a planner. So then I wanted to go try it out. So I pulled up 6th grade curriculum map, and went to a unit that my imaginary students are currently working on, which is Unit 5. And Unit 5 is all about embracing diversity. And it says that through reading, students will justify how people react to differences in others. And I struggle with that as a teacher, because how can my students justify how people react? But I think more maybe to have an understanding or an appreciation for other people, and how their views might impact their reaction to the differences they see in others. So when I look at the maps don't give me a lot of definition of what kind of knowledge students are supposed to walk away with. It tells me the standards I'm supposed to hit, and it gives me an assessment that they're going to eventually write an argumentative essay. So I know that during this unit, I'm having students write a lot in an argumentative way. And so I've given them, in my imaginary classroom, I've given them steps on how we work through that. So giving them prompts that help them build a very good argumentative response. Right here is about the only indication when you look at the essential questions, that's about the only indication of the knowledge students are supposed to walk away with. So the essential questions say, how do actions and words affect others? Why do stereotypes exist? And how do we learn to embrace our differences? And how does not our accepting differences affect world conflicts? Okay, so it's a lot, and I needed to put something together, a digital learning experience together that students could be successful with. In my mind's eye, as I was planning this, I'm planning this for an asynchronous Friday, something that they could get through together. So then I went looking, and you go online and you start looking for things, and you go down a rabbit hole, and 4 days later you come out and say, yeah, I still don't know what I'm doing. So I knew that they needed to be successful. So even though they're 6th grade, I looked for something that said elementary. Okay. And what I ended up finding was a virtual field trip about body confidence. And it's pulling up. And it started with elementary students. And it says that they're going to learn how to get smarter about the images they see online, build strategies to fight weight-based bullying and teasing, and appreciate their awesome selves. And I felt like it was a connection or an extension of what we were doing in the classroom according to the curriculum map, because I wanted them to see these differences in others. All right. And I wanted them to learn how to embrace our differences. So this was me starting to fill out the planner. So I just put in a description of that this is the 6th grade unit 5, and what I wanted them to do. So then I explained how it connected to what we're doing, and I chose the standards that it assesses. And then I struggled with what I thought I wanted my students to know and be able to do. But what I really want is for them to learn to be kinder to others and to themselves in order to accept everyone. That's very lofty, very awesome, very, very lofty. And so I think what I needed them to do by the end of this, and I'm still working with it, is that they would be writing an argumentative essay per se, and then presenting it. And so students will create a flip grid with a response to a prompt, and I will accept their knowledge of the content of the videos based on a rubric. And then if I looked at everything that the virtual field trip gave me, there is an educator's guide, and the educator's guide had before going to the field trip, during the field trip, and after the field trip. So before going to the field trip, they gave a think, pair, share, where they were supposed to work with a partner and answer questions, and then review their partner's answers, and then extend their own response. If I'm doing this asynchronously, I can't necessarily do that. But I did swipe those questions out and put it in my do now part of, I created a virtual field trip guide book, which I'll show you. And students would do the do now, and then the resource said they gave them some guided notes that they would take. And then the resource said they should draw a picture of what it all meant. And I didn't like that, because this unit is not about drawing pictures. This unit is about writing argumentative essays. So this was my virtual field trip guidebook. And I just gave them the agenda that they should do the do now, go watch the videos, do the guided notes, then do the culmination portion, then record their video, and then submit everything. So that just gave them clarity about what they were supposed to do during this asynchronous Friday. So the do now was the exact questions I saw there on the resources from the site. And these guided notes were exactly from the resources from the site. But during these guided notes, I also asked them to find a quote from each chapter. They could watch the whole thing, but it was also broken up by chapters. So if they watched each chapter, I asked them to write down a quote. And when I teach, I always teach students to snag words where they can. And so my students would be very used to putting down quotes that they heard, those things that were most powerful. And then the culmination helps them to get ready for their Flipgrid speech. And this is exactly how I would have taught my students to do it. Always answer questions in order. So what is this opening statement? What did the virtual field trip have to say about how someone looks? So they could come up with an overall arching summary here. And then they answer all these questions, and then they take that. And then it says, take the opening statement and make it in a complete sentence or a couple of sentences so that it is a complete thought. So it isn't just about putting down the right answer here. It is about writing it all out. So after they have this whole portion filled in, that would actually be their Flipgrid speech or their video speech. So if I go back to my lesson, you'll see that the only thing else, because everything that was in that virtual guidebook are these activities, materials, these steps. I would have had a vocabulary cheat sheet for any word that they might not know from the video. So as a teacher, I'd go through and listen for those words and make sure that I gave them support. And then because my students have been working in Unit 5 and we have been working on accepting diversity, I would want the readers' notebooks close so that they could use any vocabulary from that. But also in the virtual field trip guidebook down below, it asks them to tie it to anything else we've learned in class. So having their readers' notebooks would help. And then for this particular lesson, I wouldn't have any other graphic organizers. So in fairness, after I found the site, because believe me, finding the right resource is going to be the most time consuming. To type up everything and to think through this unit took me just under an hour. And so, but now I have this unit. Now I have this digital learning experience for my students that I could use every year when it comes to Unit 5. So let's go back to here. What do you guys think of the planner or my example? And please be critical, because this is how I plan, but I'm not with students right now. So let me know your thoughts. What did you guys think of the planning template?
Gladys, before everybody jumps in, I just want to let you know you have a lot of awesome feedback in the chat as well about how this ties to NIET, and people are thankful that you're sharing the template with them so that they don't have to like create things from, from scratch. So awesome. Yeah,
and I see Mary said she wants to share anything I ever make. You guys can just copy and share. I don't care. But also, if you don't like the template and you need it to change a little bit, just contact me. I love making forms. I will totally make you a form. If you need a new lesson plan format, let me know. I love that stuff. So
yeah, Gail, you go. This is Gladys's, but she just said go ahead and use it with anyone you'd like. You could just do a file, make a copy, and make it your own, and then run away with it.
So when you're planning, and I'm going to tell you honestly why I could plan that in just under an hour is because I was planning for fictional students. When you're planning for real students, you really have to think about your students. You have to think about the range of students you have and what kind of supports. The supports that Gladys need is going to be much different than what Alicia needs, or much different than what Catherine or Christine needs. So you have to really think about that. The biggest part of the support that you can give, especially if you're planning for something asynchronously, is to have clarity. Students need to know the steps that they are to accomplish. How many times have you gone online to do something and you're like, I don't even know where to click. I don't even know how to do this. And you're frustrated before the learning even starts. You're frustrated before you even attempt the activity. So take that frustration out by providing clarity from the beginning. Students need success. If it's too hard, they're going to quit. But also, if it's way too easy, they're not going to engage the way you want them to either. So you have to really know your students to know that the task is equal to their skill at that time. And students need feedback. If they think you're never going to look at it, they're never going to do it. And feedback is always the hardest. I struggled when I put together the virtual field trip guidebook because there's a lot of things I would have to grade as a teacher there. And they didn't go to a form, and they didn't go to anything else that was self-grading. I would physically have to open every kid's document to open that. So you have to weigh those pressures that you have. We want things, especially on Fridays, to be as self-grading as possible because your lives are difficult. But we also want it to be authentic, and authentic learning means that the teachers really have to work hard. We want the students to experience things, and we want them to work really hard. But in order to encourage that engagement, we have to have consistent feedback. All right. I'm going to stop sharing because we're moving on to Alicia, and she will be sharing with us some awesomeness.
Does anyone have any questions or anything before we move on to the actual resource piece? Because I want to make sure, I know it's like a lot to digest. No? Okay. So really quickly, just before we get started, I also want to say that this is going to be something that's going to, that Gladys and I had a really, we did a lot of planning in this and how we were going to present this material. So this is by no way like a foolproof, way to approach this, but it was kind of the best way that we thought, because there is so much out there, and saying virtual field trips, which a lot of you gave that feedback, is just a broad brush. All right, so let's just jump into some of these resources. And I'm going to apologize from the beginning because this is real life, and my kid's sick today. And so he's going to probably, come in here and sneeze on me or at some point during this. So just be prepared for that. If you're grossed out easily, you might want to like turn me off or something. All right. So Gladys created that really amazing template. And we were thinking, she was thinking from a point of view of, it is so easy to kind of get lost, and we can do a lot of really cool things with our kids. There's stuff that we can Google and find, 10 different activities that our kids are going to be wowed by, and their eyes are going to, get really big, and they're going to be super into it, right? But is it actually teaching them anything? Is it actually helping them to obtain that learning goal that you've set for your class, right? So we always have to keep that in the back of our minds. When you're thinking about these destinations, and we kind of already asked this in the beginning, we talked about what your dream destination was, right? So I wrote down some of them that you said: Galapagos Islands, Beowulf Caves, the zoo, the Joshua Tree, the Mexican Fine Arts Museum, national parks, space trips, Skyping with other groups. So these are all great examples of places that you could never take your kids, right? Like, it's not even like we're going to hop on a bus and take them to the Galapagos Islands tomorrow if we were in person. It's just not feasible. So how do we bring those experiences into our classrooms, whether we return in person 100% or we are remote? We don't know what the future is going to bring as far as next year. Who knows? Like, we could be, quarantined for 2 weeks or something. So what we're trying to get across here is these experiences can really be done in class with your students or at home as well. So I just want to show you this quick video. This is kind of the ideal world. So I wanted to show this to you. Let me know if you can't hear it.
I would like to go to the new Thailand ancient Greece. India to Nigeria, my homeland. One or maybe all of the 7 wonders of the world. When you explore different places, you have the chance to actually learn something new.
You want to be able to show the kids that there's something outside of your community that you can go to and learn from, and that there's other places you can visit.
All right, so let's do our objective and we'll talk about the lessons for today. We're going to take a field trip to Verona, Italy to see the place where Romeo and Juliet lived. I'm going to take you on this field trip under the water. Okay, you guys ready? Pick up your devices and look in your cardboard. What is that? I see a shark.
It would allow us to go somewhere we wouldn't normally be able to go.
This is the Great Wall of China.
We got to see the place itself, so we could actually understand what she was talking about.
How long would it take to walk the length of the Great Wall of China?
So much more enriching than just showing them a picture or just having them read about it.
This device can actually make us go to places that we've never been before.
It brings the lesson to you. You have to see it for yourself to believe it.
There's so much other places to see, so you know that it's never going to end.
All right, so that is like the grand, you know, the grand prize that we all wish we could do in our class. I wish I could give everyone Google Cardboards and do Google Expeditions, but we have a lot of limitations, especially for our younger kiddos, because many of them in first, second, third grade don't have a cell phone that they could pop into that reader and kind of go on an expedition. But I am going to show you that some of those things are available to you, even if you don't have the cardboards and the device to be able to do it. Thing to remember, it's so easy to get lost. Can you hear me, Rachel? Yeah, okay, perfect. It's easy to get lost. So when Gladys and I were planning this, there was a lot of going down rabbit holes. So we would, you know, type in a content area, we would find a website, and the next thing you know, an hour has blown by, and I'm now in full immersive learning about, you know, the Galapagos Islands and the turtles, and I'm swimming underwater and looking at coral reefs, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to get back on task, right? So this is a prime example on here of a list of expeditions that are available to you through Google. And I do have this linked in the spreadsheet, but if you're just starting to look at this, you can see how it'd be really easy for you as the teacher if you do not have a clear learning goal in mind, that you can get super lost very easily, okay? But I wanted you to know this was here in case you wanted to go explore. There are all kinds of different topics and content areas, from Antietam, you know, with a history spin to it, Apollo, Saturn Center, the Star Engineer. So there's a lot of things in here, but again, be prepared if you're not clear about what you're using this virtual field trip for. You're probably going to get lost in here as well and be poking around in all over the place, okay? But it is a resource for you, and the link is over here on the side so that you can kind of go explore some of those if you find something that that makes you like, ooh, I'm excited about that, right? Okay, so just remember, keep the learning goal in mind as you begin to think about virtual field trips and virtual experiences. All right, so the first thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to find some online story websites. I hear so many of you, especially at the elementary level, and you're looking for read-alouds and you're doing read-alouds with your kids and you're creating your own videos. If we can cut down, if people have already done it for you, then why recreate the wheel, right? Like, it is awesome for you to read to your students. I'm not saying that that's not important, but do you have to make your own videos for every book that you're doing a read aloud for? Do you have to do everything live? Can you give the kids a library where they can go and listen to books on their own when they maybe want to read or they have free time, right? So we live here in Portage. My daughter has an iPad through the Portage school system, and she didn't have any way, she didn't know how to access online books, and they can't download apps on those. So I emailed her teacher like, hey, my kid wants to read. I need to make this happen, right? Like, so if your kids want to hear stories, If they want to hear maybe stories that you haven't introduced or talked about, here's some great story read alouds that you can go to. This one's probably my favorite, the Story Online, and they have videos like this. So this is one from Angela Bassett, and she's going to be reading this book. She introduces herself, and there's all kinds of different famous people.
Online, brought to you by the SAG-AFTRA Foundation. I'm Angela Bassett, and today I'm reading Trombone Shorty, written by Troy Andrews and illustrated by Brian Cohen.
Okay, so I really like this site as far as a place for you to be able to find books for your students and have them read aloud. If you're talking about in class or at home, they can do this as well. So it translates back and forth, but they have lots of books that you can go in and different people who read those books to the students. So feel free, you don't have to stay with me. You can poke around in there on your own. I'm not going to be upset if you're not with me the whole time. Another great place, and I mentioned this in a previous PD session that I did, is Google Earth. So Google Earth has a whole area called Voyages that you can go in, and they are focused on education. So they're focused on things that you're teaching in your classroom. Does anyone here teach fairy tales in their classes or in their courses, or talk about fairy tales at all? I see some heads shaking. Yeah. So this is about fairy tales from around the world. You visit different places and talk about their fairy tales and their stories, and you know, it's culturally based. Depending on where they are, there's different languages, different vocabulary. So it's just another way to kind of broaden our students' approach and broaden their eyes to the outside world. And also bring in some fresh material for the kiddos. And it's something that, if structured correctly, like something using Gladys's template, that they would be able to kind of work through at their own pace, but still keeping that learning goal as the end game, right? A lot of these also have videos that are accompanied with it. So if you have students that are maybe not at that reading level, or kind of really struggle, there's a lot of video and reading of the text that can happen in these areas too. Okay. When we move into different content areas that we have in this PD, so we have social studies, of course, tons of things for social studies. If you just Google virtual field trips with whatever content area you're looking for, you're going to find hundreds. So again, easy to get lost. A few things that I really like about these are they're very interactive. The students can move around in the space. You know, if we go to the Holocaust Memorial Museum, they can pick different areas that they can explore on their own. You know, here's one. If we're reading Anne Frank, we can get into launching the exhibition. Go back. We can go to the museum. We can search events that are happening. So there's a whole wide world up there. But like I said, especially for our younger students, when you send them to something that looks like this, or that is set up with a lot of things to click on, they're going to get lost and overwhelmed very easily. So that's why we need to make sure that we're structuring it down to, you know, the T, right? If we go to this Ellis Island interactive tour, this is through Scholastic. I've actually used this in the past with my students when I taught US history, and they really seemed to enjoy the whole interactive experience. So they can go through a tour, what it was like to get on the boat, what it was like to, you know, be on the trip once they got to Ellis Island, how that was. So they even give you a lot of activity guides for teachers in here, which I think is really helpful on how you can approach these things. So if you're a social studies teacher, feel free to go down that rabbit hole while we're moving on. But I only gave you a few examples for each content area. Science, a lot of cool things with science, right? This discovery education, you could get lost in there for a long time. Another Google Earth, Voyager, how wind becomes electricity. You know, you can click on that. It'll take you right into that voyage that talks about wind power and electricity. We have, you know, the wind too far from here. down 65 and 41. So it might be something that they've seen before that they're interested in. It'll pop up here. But it allows the students to look around. They can even drop themselves down into that street view and kind of take a look at things on a deeper level if they're interested. Google Earth moves a little slowly, but they're able to navigate around the space. They're able to, look at it in different viewpoints. So Google Earth, I always love that. I'm always going to be a proponent of that. There's experiments that you can do with Bill Nye. The Nature Lab was another really cool one that, I try to vet these sources to be as educational as possible as far as your content area. But this one's broken down into age group by the curriculum by age group. Okay, and they have a whole virtual field trip page, climate change and exploring different places around the world. So again, keeping that learning goal in mind of what you're looking for. Even for math, I worked really hard to try to find some things for our math people in the group. So I loved this one, Finding the Beauty of Math Outside the Classroom. And I thought about how we could take that idea and really apply it to our own students' world they're living in now. They're at home, they're in their communities, they're not in school with you. How can we say, all right, let's go out through your eyes in your community, and you do the virtual field trip and tell me what kind of angles you see, what kind of triangles you see. Use those things that you're talking about in class and apply them to what they see around them in their neighborhoods and in their homes. Mixing math with art. I liked this one because there wasn't a bunch of things that you need to kind of give the kids as far as materials are concerned to be able to do. It's like a lot with just paper and a pencil. So I thought that was really cool to kind of bring those two together. I don't always think of, math and art working closely together, but maybe you'll prove me wrong on that. Okay, some art ones for you. Some people said that they wanted to go to, where's my notes, the Mexican Fine Arts Museum. So I've given you some different museums that you can visit. But like I said, if you Google that, you're going to probably find a bunch of areas that already have these made for you. So you're not kind of creating things from scratch. They're all right there. So these are really famous museums that you can go to and click on. So if you just click here, it'll take you right into those museums and you can start to look around and explore. Okay, so now I'm inside the museum. I can spin around. I can move through the museum. I can go to, different rooms and visit different areas. Okay, I can click on the bottom here to see specific artworks if there's something that really grabs my attention. So it just allows the kids outside of the classroom, outside of their world, to see what else is out there. I've never been to the Frida Kahlo Museum, and I'm sure that a lot of our kids haven't. So it's just a cool place if you're talking about her, or if you're talking about art and culture, that you can point them in this direction for them to be able to see things in real time. And then we get to that second piece that that Gladys really touched on. When you're thinking about what your learning goal is there a learning goal or is it just for fun, right? So we talked a lot about how there's all these zoos and wildlife and live safaris and underwater things. But I think Gladys was talking like, oh, I can go see the penguins. Oh, okay, What is the learning objective for that? Like, what are we trying to learn by looking at the penguins for an hour, you know, dipping under the water and playing? Is it just for fun? Okay, then watch the polar bears and the penguins till your heart's content, right? But always keeping in mind that learning goal in the back of our head, so that we're staying true to what we're trying to do in class and what we're trying to teach the kids. Oh, Rachel says, brain break, just make sure they are not mating. Good point. All right, good point. So if you send your kids to something like this is what they're going to see. A lot of it could be boring and nothing is happening. The next thing you know, a lion is chasing, you know, a gazelle across the plain. So you can't expect that, because it's a live feed, that there's going to be something exciting happening for the kids every moment of the day. Like, I'm an adult and I'm already over this. I'm ready to move on. And I'm sure the kids will be as well. But I did add in some just for fun things that maybe you would click on and take your kids as maybe a Friday adventure, or maybe, you know, a little extra during the day, a brain break even. These are live tours that you can go to. The only problem is that you have to do it during their time. And these are mostly located in Africa, so the time is way different. So you would have to make sure that those line up with when you have your kiddos in class or when they're available. But they do take you through. Sometimes you can even ask the tour guide or the safari guide questions in a chat, and they will try to answer your questions. So it's really a cool experience if it goes along with what you're teaching in your class, or if it's just an extra. Catherine says that we could use it to talk about time differences, because it is nighttime in Africa. So if we were talking about time differences, then that might be something that that we could utilize when we're looking at that. Okay, and then when in doubt, Google it, right? So I'm just going to look at what you all gave for some things that you wanted to do. So if I go to Google and I just type in, and I'm probably going to spell it wrong. I just clicked in Galapagos virtual tour. I am going to get all of these resources for me. Another really good one is the 360 experiences. And the reason I like those is because the kids can move around on their own. Ooh, let me come down here.
Is an island.
So it kind of walks them through, and then the kids can, you know, move around and see everything at one time as it goes forward. So there's a lot of 360 videos that are out there on all different kinds of topics. Oh, there's a turtle.
These islands sparked Darwin's theory of evolution.
All right, so for my Galapagos person, that's pretty awesome thing for the students to do if you're really looking into that, or if you yourself want to explore. So when in doubt, you can Google and you can find a ton of resources, but you're probably going to be overwhelmed. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I gave you a resource.
They will definitely be overwhelmed. If not, you will probably. It is a definite. It is a wormhole. But simply because something connects to what you think you're doing, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to enhance the learning. I have done a lot of work with the second grade team, and we put together Unit 10, which is about animal adaptations. So I thought, well, I'll plan something to go with that. And so, okay, we'll go to the zoo. Well, I can look at some baboons, but how is that going to teach my students anything deeper about animal adaptations? So it's not a good connect. But if I wanted it to be slightly connected because they're, you know, talking about animals and it's just for fun, then my focus for this digital learning experience is much different. So you have to really think about what you want to accomplish with this time that you're sending students out into the world. And if you send them to see animals, you're going to see animals doing animal behavior, which might include some things that you can't control. I'm just saying. Just the same as when you take them to the zoo. I've taken kids to the zoo, and there has been animal behavior that I didn't want my first graders to see, but it happened.
learning experience, right? Be ready to answer those questions. So as we're looking at this crazy amount of resources, and you're looking at that template that Gladys was awesome enough to put together, and you're asking yourself, what is my goal? Why am I so interested in virtual field trips? Is it for that fun piece, or do I have a specific learning goal in mind? What is one thing that I need to think about when planning a digital learning experience? So let's just take a full stop here for a minute, because I know that that was a lot of information. And let's get your feedback about, looking at resources like this and asking yourself what your goal is and what you're really hoping your kiddos can get out of a virtual learning experience. Anyone have any thoughts that they'd like to share with the group?
I'll go ahead and speak. I think from the little yellow birdie, things that we need to think about before planning it, because it's a lot of information, I think is just to be prepared to deal with breaking down some of the preconceived notions that our students might have about certain places where, we're looking at it for one reason, but for example, I remember when I went over Guinea Equatorial in Africa, for my students, it's like, wait, there's green grass there, like they have clothes. So it's being prepared also to have those conversations that, they might not be ready to take on because they've been in the little bubble of Indiana for so long.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Ms. Soto, is like, we also have to prep our students that when they go into some of these other countries, or they're looking at some of these experiences, that you're also open to what's happening, or your preconceived notions, how those can be, maybe that's part of your learning goal. Like, what did you think you were going to see? And then what did you actually see? And how are those things, drastically different, or even, close to what you thought it was going to be? So I think you're right about that. Having that conversation with your students beforehand is important. Anyone else want to share their thoughts or ideas?
Mary in the chat said that she's looking for an experience that will pique her students' curiosity and have them want to learn more while being connected to a specific learning objective. She wants them to want to learn more about the subject on their own after the field trip.
So we talked last week, and if you were in my session, we talked about like 20% time and letting students explore something that really interests them. So maybe, it's a little bit of that, but also a little bit of structure with giving them that learning objective and using some of these experiences to explore those things that they're interested in.
And then I really think, because I watched your video from last week, Alicia, I really think that if we push our kids to then create something, create their reaction to it. So it's not just a Flipgrid video, but maybe, I'm not always very comfortable in front of the camera. I might want to do something with a voiceover, or I might want to do I would definitely want to do some sort of art, some sort of visual that shows what I've learned. So I think pushing that creation that you talked about last week can go very hand in hand with this, and does change your grading rubric, does change, but it also helps to engage the kids, and it makes the learning more authentic, and the students then own it.
We have now I can take my students to China during class time, 100%, like bringing it from the textbook or even a picture that you're showing on your overhead or on your screen when you're sharing. If they can explore it a little bit on their own, I think it brings in a little bit more connectivity with the kids if they have control over where they're going and what they're doing.
But really thinking about, so you're taking them to China, what is it that you want them to get from this experience? If it's just an appreciation, okay. But if there's something more, then you need to plan for that.
Kim had her hand up. Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to thank you so much for having an entire slide with links for art. I'm visual arts at Hammond High now. I will be at Hammond Central next year, and and all of your PDs are always great, but sometimes it's not, focused so much into a special. So I'd like to thank you for that. And, as far as this slide goes, one thing to think about when planning, I put together a virtual field trip last year when we went into e-learning at the Art Institute. A lot of places were like, we were getting bombed with, okay, we're going to offer this, we're going to offer this. Everybody was on lockdown. And I had went to the Art Institute and I was able to very user-friendly navigate through there. So I wasn't in just a generalized field trip. We were working on still lifes, and I was able to pick and choose the artists and the paintings I wanted to show. So kids weren't just going on a link and just looking at all the nudes or whatever it is at the art museum. So that was fantastic. And, I still have that, and, I plan on using that in the future as well and expanding on it. And thank you for those links and including the art specials in your presentation.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm hoping that, I know that sometimes it's hard for some of our specials and some of our elective courses to say, like, how can I relate this to my content? So I'm glad that you found that to be useful. Kim, Nathan has a question for you. How did you get that painting in the background? Google only has a generic pic.
Okay, so when we learned this semester how to do the digital backgrounds, I played around with it. But unfortunately for me, I work off of a School City of Hammond Chromebook. So that is not, the greatest device that I could be on, but that's what I have. So when I played around with it, it worked for me. It doesn't work in a live Google Meets because I'm on a School City of Hammond Chromebook. This is a fabric that I hung up. So
nice. So we're kind of getting to the end of our time, and I want to make. Nathan's very upset. He called you a cheater.
I'm an improviser.
It's old school. It's actual. It's an actual tangible thing that she can hold in her hand.
Right.
That background's not glitchy at all. So.
Yeah, no. So I want to be cognizant of everyone's time because we're almost here at the hour. But I want to please remind you that virtual experiences are going to be relevant, whether we're in a remote learning situation like this or we're in person with the kids. Because again, a lot of these places that you would want them to see, I taught 11th grade and I would literally have panic and anxiety attacks if I even thought about taking my kids anywhere because I was dead. I was like, I'm going to lose one of them. Something's going to happen, right? So we might not be able to just jump on a bus anytime that we want to go to the Art Institute or we want to go, see the Galapagos Islands. So my hope for you all in this, for the 31 people that are in this session, is that if you leave here and you have your learning objective that you're going to be going with the kids in the next unit or in the next few weeks, and you really want to bring in a virtual experience for that, please reach out to Gladys and I and say, hey, here is what I am teaching. Here is my learning goal. I really would love to do a virtual experience. Gladys and I can work with you, or if you prefer Gladys, you can work with Gladys, and we can help you to make sure that, yes, you're bringing in that virtual experience, but you're also staying true to the learning goal that you have in mind that you want to get through to the kids in that unit. So use us as a resource because that's what we're here for.
Thank you all who participated today. Thank you for all your talk in the chat and unmuting. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to stop the recording right now. So if anyone wants